Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustments meeting for December 2021. We are opening this meeting at 6:02 p.m. and we would like to, we call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum, 4 members and 1 alternate, so we have a total of 5. And we'd like to get started today with the approval of minutes. We have a motion on the floor.
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second for the approval of the November minutes of 2021. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries. Jerry?
I was going to say, Chair, now that Mr. Acosta is back in the room, we'll make sure that the minutes reflect that he is here. And then because he is a regular member, it would bump Mr. Jane back down.
Move into our new business. And this is a request by Mark Chiriboga. Please excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. Applicant on behalf of Todd A. Carlson, owner, to allow a special exception and variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code, Ordinance number 2000-T, to allow the development of a restaurant with drive-through on a site with existing non-conformities, with deviations from corridor overlay district requirements in the general business district. The general location is 9821 Broadway Street, Pearland, Texas. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, we will. Let me introduce Florence Buaku, who is one of our planners here in Community Development. Florence, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. My name is Florence Buaku with Community Development. This request is for, this would compose of 2 separate requests. One would be a special exception from existing non-conformities on an already developed site, and then there would also be requests for variances for a proposed drive-through restaurant on an existing developed site. The location is 8921 Broadway. The property is zoned general business, and as I said earlier, the intended use is a restaurant with drive-through. Staff sent out notices to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property, and we did not receive any comments back. The property has an underlying land use of retail, offices, and services, and it's zoned general business, both of which allow the requested use. That's the restaurant with drive-through. Next slide, please. So just to give you a brief history of the property, this property was annexed into the city in 1996. And then it was developed as a multi-tenant retail center in 2002. And so this was before the adoption of the Unified Development Code, which designated Broadway as a corridor overlay district. The property was subsequently platted in 2005. So what you see here is an aerial view of the existing developed property. The intent is to develop a portion of the parking lot, and that is the southwest corner of the parking lot, into a restaurant with a drive-through. So just to give you some information about the context, what you see, the first 2 images show the subject property. The first image is actually the site where the restaurant with the drive-through would be placed. And then directly across from the site to the south is an apartment complex. And then across the site to the west is a multi-tenant retail center. And so we do have 2 sets of requests today. One is a special exception. The first special exception is from the 30-foot landscape buffer requirement in the Corridor Overlay District. And so as I mentioned earlier, this site was developed before the Corridor Overlay District was adopted in the Unified Development Code. And so the existing site does not meet that requirement for parking to have a 30-foot landscape buffer from the Corridor Overlay Street, which is Broadway. And then the second special exception request is from the 15% landscape requirement for the total site. And so the Corridor Overlay District requires that the total site have at least a 15% landscaping. And because this was done before then, it does not have it. And so the Unified Development Code requires that whenever there's a proposal to add a new building or structure to a site that has existing nonconformities, it requires the approval of a special exception. And so that is why we have this before the board. The second set of requests are for variances. One is from the landscape buffer requirement in the Corridor Overlay District. And so these variances are specifically for the new development that the applicant is proposing. They will not be able to meet that 30-foot landscape buffer requirement along Broadway, and they would like to reduce it to 25 feet 3 inches from the required 30 feet. And then the second variance would be from the 15% site landscape. And again, even with the addition of the proposed development, they will not be able to meet the required 15% site landscaping. And so they are requesting a reduction to 7.5%. So this is the proposed site plan and also the existing development. And so the two gray boxes to your north show the existing development. And then in the southwest corner, you see the proposed drive-through restaurant. I'm going to give you a little more detail about that in the next slide. Okay. So I'm not sure. Okay, let's stay with that. I had a zoomed in slide, but I'm not sure what happened to it. So what we are showing right now is the drive-through, showing the stacking spaces for the drive-through. The applicant intends to have some outdoor seating as well for the restaurant. It's going to be a Starbucks, so there's some outdoor seating and some landscaping. And so the variance is being requested to the south of the property, where you have the cursor showing. And so the applicant is requesting to reduce that. It's supposed to be 30 feet, but the applicant is requesting to reduce that to 25 feet 3 inches. Next slide, please. And so staff has reviewed both requests according to the criteria outlined in the Unified Development Code. And for the special exception, staff has concluded that it does meet criteria number 4, which allows the construction of a new structure on a property that has existing nonconformities. And for this one, it's supposed to meet only one criteria. And so it does meet criteria number 4. The next one would be for the variances. Again, staff has reviewed it according to the criteria outlined in the Unified Development Code. And staff has determined that it does not meet the hardship criteria because there's no special circumstance arising from the physical surrounding or shape of the site. This is an existing developed site, and the applicant is hoping to develop the parking lot. Then, because this is an existing developed site, this variance is not necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the petitioner. And then the hardship is also somehow being caused by the petitioner by trying to redevelop an existing site. But we do not believe that the development would prevent the orderly use of property or would be detrimental to public health or safety. And so we can see that it's not meeting most of the criteria for approving the variances. And so with that, staff is recommending approval of the special exception to add a new building to a site with existing non-conformities. And then staff is recommending a denial of the requested variances, that is for the reduction in the 30-foot landscape buffer, as well as a reduction in the required 15-foot landscaping of the site. But at the same time, staff is aware that this is an infill project and has challenges. And so if the board chooses to approve the variance request, staff recommends that the applicant works with staff to resolve any potential traffic issues. That is an issue that was raised by our engineering department. And so even with approval of the variance, they are required to have an approved traffic impact analysis, but they may also have to work with staff to redesign the layout to better suit traffic purposes. So that concludes staff reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Florence. Do we have an applicant presentation? If you would, sir, would you state your name and address?
My name is Mark Chiriboga, and my address is 18118 Harmony Estates Lane, Cypress, Texas, 77429.
Thank you, sir.
And I think Florence did a good job in defining what we're asking for. What we'd like you to look at is the impact of a Starbucks on this corner. It is a very good location for what we're proposing, in such that there are Starbucks surrounding us, but they don't have drive-thrus, where this particular destination is pretty much a drive-through only. We do have a window, but we don't have any interior seating or restroom. So actually staying on the site would be very limited. We have, so that's pretty much what we're looking at. We have a pretty high density around this area with apartments to our south, subdivisions to our north. To the southeast, there is some area that is undeveloped that I would suspect will be developed as residential in the future, which would allow this development to succeed. The other thing is just beautification of the site itself, the modern look that we're seeing. I didn't see the renderings. Florence, do we have the renderings available or no?
You should have the renderings in your packet. I don't know if you...
Okay. So we're proposing a modern design that will also encompass the buildings in the back, or to do facelifts for those. Just basically beautification of the entire site. The bank withdraw will be demolished, which is not being used right now. And of course, the center will be updated. So overall, I think it would benefit the community economically, and it would be a good thing for the board to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any persons wishing to speak for or against proposal? Okay, now we'd like to go into staff and applicant discussion.
A quick question to staff. Florence, could you tell me again, or remind me, my memory's gradually fading, but remind me what the existing nonconformity is that was already existing there?
So the existing nonconformity is one that they do not have the 30-foot landscape buffer, which is required between a parking lot and Broadway Street, which is the corridor overlay district. And so whenever you have parking that is adjacent to a corridor overlay district street, you do require a 30-foot landscape buffer.
Martin, would you put those south, north pictures up? There you go.
It's my understanding that on the south east side of that intersection, the apartment complex is still on that southeast and southwest side. Would that be accurate? So that Miller Ranch Road tees into Broadway and runs into the main entrance of the apartment complex?
Yes, that's correct.
Can we see the site rendering, please? It looks like there are numerous parking spaces that will be lost or eliminated by this development. Will that create a situation where there will be insufficient parking spaces to conform with city requirements for the restaurant, the Kolachi shop, and the other various restaurants that are already there?
So the development is being classified together with the existing as a multi-tenant shopping center, which gives it somewhat a lower parking requirement than what would be required for a drive-through restaurant.
By eliminating these particular parking spaces, will there be a non-conformity of any kind for this business center being created? Because it seems like there will be several parking spaces lost.
So to answer the question directly, the addition of the building on the site is being captured with the other buildings that are also on the lot. So it's the total amount of area, while it is increasing, there was existing parking, there was an overture of parking on the site. So this addition of the building and the drive-through area, while they are reducing the total number of parking spaces, it's not bringing a new nonconformity to the site.
So for example, with the Kolachi Factory restaurant, which is closest to the proposed development, that business would sustain the most significant reduction in parking spaces, and staff believes that the parking spaces way on the other side of the development should be sufficient to accommodate that business.
The lot has enough parking.
Is there any type of divider between the drive-through traffic pattern for the proposed development and the drive-through parking or traffic pattern of the Kolachi factory?
I think Mr. Chiriboga would probably be the best to answer that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you look at the driver's side for the Kolachi, you would have to go north. So the line would be kind of separated from the Starbucks line, which more than likely people would be coming from Broadway. They can come from Smith Ranch, I believe it's Smith Ranch, Road as well.
So my question is there a wall or some other type of barrier between
Yes,
that
there is.
area?
There's a landscaping buffer right there that's being pointed to with the arrow.
And this is for staff. Has there been, I saw a contingency somewhere in the proposal or the recommendation that if, at least at the very least, if the variance request was approved, there'd have to be a potential traffic conflict. And if I heard staff correctly, staff recognizes that there will be potential traffic issues if this development goes forward. If we were to approve this here today, are we creating a situation where there will be additional issues or non-conformities requiring another special exception or variance?
The site plan you are seeing has not been approved by staff. And so this site plan is purposely to discuss the proposed variance. If this variance is approved, it will still go through staff review. They would still need an approved traffic impact analysis, and staff would still need to ensure that any potential traffic conflicts are resolved before it's given the final approval.
Additionally, that may include directional signage or things that the engineering group would recommend to ensure that the traffic flows are appropriately handled.
And if we do not approve the special exception and the variance, will the development be feasible by creating some other type of drive-through flow on this corner?
Feasible from the developer's perspective or feasible from the city's perspective?
City's perspective.
From the city's perspective, if you don't approve the special exception, they cannot build the building in any way. However, if you don't approve the variances, there are other ways to design the building and the parking and the drive-through that would comply with all of the city's regulations. The variances are not needed, they're just desired. For example, the driveway immediately north of the proposed Starbucks location could be closed. If you look at the aerial, there are plenty of driveways. By doing that, the entire building could be shifted north. And that might not be what this particular applicant wants, or that might not be what the developer or the owner of the property wants, but it is a viable alternative design that does not necessitate the variance.
So to be,
If I'm understanding that correctly from staff in our meetings.
Yeah.
Yes.
so to make sure I understand correctly, the staff is proposing and the development would be feasible if we were to deny the special exception but grant the variance.
Flip.
The other way around.
Yeah.
Grant the
Special exception. That will allow them to build on a lot that doesn't meet the current, that will allow them to build on a lot that has existing nonconformities, but deny the variance requests because there are alternative designs that may accomplish a building being put on this lot.
And I think I can provide some additional clarification. Essentially, the special exception is if you took an imaginary dividing line where the cursor is, and everything east of there, so everything over here is what we're talking about the special exception for, because those are all existing features of the lot as it currently stands. Everything to the west is where we're talking about the variances, because those are where the new features of the property would exist. That may help you visualize and understand what the two and why there are two separate issues.
Right. And again, that is the city's perspective, whether or not it's economically viable, whether or not the property owner would be willing to do these alternative designs. Those we haven't had those conversations.
Yeah, this is the first time the developer's really discussing this, closing off that driveway. And I would kind of challenge that, because if we move that driveway up 5 feet, if we get rid of the driveway and we move the development up 5 feet, that's putting those parked cars there by the where you're ordering, the ordering section, it's putting it in the driveway to get around the donut shop. You wouldn't have your 24 feet.
I have a question just for clarification. Whether the variance is granted or not, I would assume we would still go through the TIA process to resolve any traffic issues to the best of our ability.
Correct. So the TIA is going to be required in either case. It's just that the TIA normally only deals with the roadway entrances
And not the
and not the actual traffic flow within the property. Because this is showing potential points of additional conflict, that's why our engineering staff would like to have that additional say for this development.
Thank you.
I have one more question of staff. This pertains to the existing buildings on the north side of the big parking lot there. When we grant permission, that's the right word, for a business to move into there, I know that traffic flow is critically important in a retail business like this. And if we wind up blocking off one of the entrance exits on the west side, would we not thereby be reducing potential retail traffic to those other businesses that already are existing there? I'm not sure. In my perspective, I'm not sure that we shouldn't consider the rights of those folks there that have a existing business if we're going to affect their traffic flow, traffic volume in that parking lot. And the reason I'm sensitive to that is there's a small strip shopping center near my house. We changed the traffic flow. We blocked off one of the entrances to that strip center. And a lot of those businesses now are just gone. They couldn't take it with just one entrance exit. So I don't know, I'm real sensitive. I hate to see us block off or do anything that would restrict traffic flow to the existing businesses there, just to accommodate moving a building up 10 feet or whatever it would be.
I want to make sure, because I think you're basing your comment off of something I said. And I would say that we're not saying we have to close the driveway. We're saying that that is a design alternative that doesn't require any of the variances. By shifting the building up, you could do that. Again, I don't know if that's going to be what they want to do, and we're not saying it has to happen, but it is possible that the TIA says, and they're not going to say that you have, they're going to say reduce this traffic conflict point. As much as they might want traffic flow to go into the business, what they want more is to reduce conflict points that can cause an accident on the exterior of the building. I'm sure that traffic engineers would describe it a little bit differently, but
Yeah.
hung around on them enough to know to use the word conflict point.
I'm just real sensitive to the potential, even of allowing that potential to exist, of harming those pre-existing businesses. When they signed their leases, they knew what they were signing a lease for there. And if the city comes back and allows a change to that traffic flow, I don't think it would be, or could allow a change to the traffic flow there. I don't think it would be fair to those existing businesses, but I just raised that for consideration.
And to take the other side of the point of that, this is infill development. This is altering a site that is in existence that the property owner is looking to enhance in order to bring more business. So those issues are something that are separate away from what the city is concerned with. The city is concerned with just whether or not a development could infill in there, not necessarily the ramifications of having more development on this site.
Do you have any more questions, board, to the staff or to the applicant?
I have one, the applicant. It looks like, are you reducing the width of the drive on the side street? There's a different pattern of shade there that looks like you're moving that drive or narrowing the drive.
Yes, I believe that we're narrowing it down to the minimum.
And on this drawing, it's difficult to see what dimension you have there between the proposed development and the parking for the Kolachi and the Wells Fargo properties or lease spaces. That dimension to me would be, it's hard to read on here without zooming it up. What is it?
It's 25 foot 1 inches.
Okay, all right. That was my only concern. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions by the board? We put the motion.
I was just going to suggest that that site plan that you were just referring to, Mr. Acosta, that is not an approved site plan. We don't know, we're not guaranteeing anything in regards to the driveway being narrowed. It's still going to have to comply with all codes. Additionally, the renderings that they provided, those are what they hope to see. There's nothing that says that that is what you will see. You're only voting on tonight whether or not to grant the special exception and whether to grant the variances. You're not voting on driveways, you're not voting on the renderings, the site plan, or anything else of that nature.
We'd like to move into consideration and possible action. Do we have a motion on the floor?
Yes, I move that the board follow staff's recommendation and approve VARZ 21-00018 as follows. Approval of the special exceptions to add new building to site with existing nonconformities, but deny the requested variances.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion?
I do have one question. Could those be considered separately?
Yes, sir, they can.
Then I will withdraw my previous motion.
Mr. Shrum, since you seconded, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that, yes.
Okay, and then we'll do them individually.
My first motion will be to, as a sub-motion, part 1, or part A of VARZ 21-00018, I move that we approve the special exceptions to add new building to site with existing nonconformities.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second to that again.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. That motion carries 5-0. Do we have another motion?
I will make the second part of that motion, VARZ 21-00018. I move that we deny the requested variances.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion?
Dummy me, could I ask staff if they could specifically put that in English, what variances we are voting to approve here or denying approval of variances?
Yes, but also, Lawrence, do we want that motion as the affirmative instead of?
We'll restate it. I will restate it with specificity if necessary, if you put it.
Martin's just suggesting that it be stated in the affirmative versus voting to deny, but I'm tracking it whichever way. I know which way is easier for me to count, but if everybody's on the same page, we're okay with it.
I'll place it in the affirmative because it's easier to
Okay,
report, I believe.
thank you.
So the variances are to reduce the landscape, the corridor overlay district landscape buffer from 30 foot to 25 foot 3 inches, and then to reduce the total required landscaped area from 15% of the site area to 7.5% of the site area.
We do have a motion on the floor. Is there, you're going to rescind your?
Yes, I rescind the previous variance motion.
Okay. And Mr. Shrum, since you were the second, okay, he's good with that.
I need the previous screen.
And I think you're looking to state
This
it
one.
in the, if you look at the far right column.
I move that we approve the requested variance that the landscape buffer for all parking and maneuvering areas be reduced from 30 foot to a 25-foot, 3-inch landscape buffer, and that the total site area landscaping requirement shall be reduced from 15% down to 7.5% as far as the landscape buffer is concerned. Those are the requested variances.
Are we voting to approve that or deny that on the motion?
It's stated in the affirmative, so we're voting to approve it.
Okay.
A no vote would be a denial from you. A yes vote would be to grant the variance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion does not carry. It was a 3-2 vote. 2-3 vote, excuse me.
Sorry.
So we'd like to move on to the next consideration and possible action for VARZ 21-00019 side setback variance for development in the light industrial district. This is a request by Cool the Air LLC applicant and owner to allow a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance number 2000-T to allow reduced side setbacks for a proposed office warehouse in the light industrial district. This is a general location north and west of 3426 Main Street in Pearland, Texas. Marcia, you have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so this request came before the board at the last ZBA meeting. That's the November 4th ZBA meeting, and it was postponed to allow the applicant to further develop the site plan and present it to the board. So I'm going to go through the last presentation and also talk about the new site plan that the applicant has. So this variance is for reduced side setbacks. Previously, the applicant was requesting to reduce both side setbacks from 25 feet required in the light industrial district to 12.5 feet on each side. The applicant came back and further developed the site plan, and so they are now requesting a 10-foot setback on one side in lieu of the 25-foot setback required. The location is north and west of 3426 Main Street, and the proposed use is an office warehouse. So again, staff sent out notification to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property, and we did not receive any comments in support or in opposition of the request. The property is zoned light industrial and is mostly surrounded by light industrial zoning, which supports the proposed office warehouse use. The property has an underlying land use of light industrial, which also supports the proposed use, and it's also located along Main Street, which is a corridor overlay district street. So what you see on your screen is a brief history of the site. So the original lot was platted in 1986. And after that platting, the property was subdivided and platted, a portion was platted. And so the portion to the southeast corner was platted and developed as a gas station in 2004. In that same year, a portion of the property was carved out to provide detention for the gas station, but that detention area was never platted. And then the remainder lot was acquired by the applicant, and what they are trying to do is to develop it into an office warehouse. I left out one important detail, that a conditional use permit was denied for that remainder lot in 2008 before it was sold to the current applicant. So just to provide some context, this property abuts both a gas station and a detention area, so it kind of surrounds the detention area. And then all the areas directly abutting it are undeveloped and is directly across from an industrial plant. So the views that you see, the top one is for the gas station. The red arrow points to the location of the subject property. And then to the view to the southwest corner is the frontage that the property has along Magnolia Parkway, which is also a corridor overlay district street. And then the next view to the southeast corner is the industrial plant directly across from the property. So this is the proposed or newly proposed site layout that the applicant presented. This is slightly different from what you have in your packet. The applicant updated the site plan, and so this is the newly updated site plan. Then this is a zoom in of the newly updated site plan. To the north is the proposed 10-foot side setback, which the applicant is requesting instead of the required 25 feet. They will be meeting, according to the site plan, they will be meeting the 25-foot setback to the south and to the east and the west. Again, this site plan has not been approved by staff. Staff believes that it still needs a little more work, but staff is more optimistic that the applicant may be able to come to a more acceptable or an approvable site plan with this variance. And so staff has reviewed the request based on the criteria outlined in the Unified Development Code, and the request meets the criteria. We believe that this site has, in its current state, has a hardship because of the shape, and this is not something that we see with other properties. It's a unique hardship. But staff does not believe that this hardship was not caused by the petitioner. Staff believes that the petitioner was somewhat aware of this hardship. And then there's also a financial implication with this hardship. And so those are the two that the applicant is not meeting, but we believe that this development will not be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare, and it is necessary to help feasibly develop this property. And so based on that, I think I've gone through the staff analysis, and so we just want to say that if this is approved, the applicant will still be required to meet all the light industrial district regulations and the corridor overlay district regulations, both along Magnolia Parkway and Main Street. And they will also need to meet fire safety and engineering requirements. We haven't received approval from the fire marshal on the new layout, so that is still pending. And so based on that, staff is recommending approval of the proposed variance for a 10-foot side setback reduction on one side of the property in lieu of the 25 feet required in the light industrial district as requested by the applicant. That concludes staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Do we have an applicant presentation? Okay, thank you, sir. Any persons wishing to speak for or against proposed proposal? We'd like to move into staff and board discussion, the applicant discussion. Any questions for the board?
I have a question on the proposed layout. It appears that even with the 10-foot proposed side setback, that a portion of parking space 5 and the loading ramp would be within the setback.
Yes, so the setback is for the actual structure, that is the building on the property. The parking and the sidewalk are allowed to encroach into that setback.
And is the purpose, is the purpose of the side setback in any way related to getting emergency vehicles on the backside of the warehouse in case of emergency, fire trucks, things of that sort, or is it for some other reason?
I would say that the side setback is more to keep buildings away from each other, and those buildings may have uses which either provide for a potential nuisance or for some cause to remain having adequate air, adequate light, be able to enter into the building rather than necessarily a life safety issue. This 10-foot side setback that's being requested will still need to maintain hose length requirements for the fire department and any other fire safety requirements. So,
any other questions by the board? Would you put the motion up? We'd like to move into consideration and possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve VARZ 21-00019 as presented.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into our third case, consideration and possible action of VARZ 21-00020, exception to reconstruct a single-family dwelling on a property with existing nonconformities. This is a request by Julio C. Itriada, and please, my apologies for not pronouncing correctly. Applicant and owner to allow a special exception as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-T to allow for the reconstruction of a new single-family dwelling on a property with existing nonconformities. This is a general location of 4802 Scott Lane, Pearland, Texas 77581. Staff report.
So, board, let me introduce for his first presentation our new planner, Mr. Patrick Bauer. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. As you heard, my name is Patrick Bauer with the Community Development Department. The request before you today, as you said, is for an exception to reconstruct a single-family dwelling on a property with existing nonconformities. Those existing nonconformities relate to the accessory structures on the site that are used for stable and for storage. As you can see from the UDC requirements, they relate to such things as if they are used for commercial purposes, they'd be subject to the regulations of the neighborhood service, as they are a non-residential use, potentially in a residential zoning, as well as some requirements of accessory structures. such as the 3-foot distance away from property lines, the no encroachment of structures into the dedicated easement, as well as the total floor area of accessory structures not to exceed 5% of the lot area, and that no more than 3 accessory structures on any residential lot are allowed unless they are over 10 acres. The request again is to reconstruct a single-family dwelling on a property with existing nonconformities. The general location is 4802 Scott Lane, Pearland, Texas. The zoning is single-family residential 1, and the intended use is to continue as a single-family dwelling. And notice was sent out to all property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. And staff received 1 phone call asking for more information about the request. As mentioned, the zoning of the property is single-family residential 1. The properties to the north, east, and west are all zoned as single-family residential 1 as well. And the property to the south is zoned general commercial. And just below the GC is where the McHard Road expansion will take place in the future. The future land use of the site is industrial, as well as the other properties to the east, west, and south are also their future land use is industrial. And the properties to the north are medium density residential. So just a little bit of a history on the property. It was originally annexed into the city in 1960. There was a home prior to Hurricane Harvey on the site. However, the home was destroyed during Hurricane Harvey. After that, the property was platted in 2018. And recently plans have been submitted for a new single-family home on the site. And this is a Texas General Land Office sponsored project. Additionally, between 2010 and 2020, no permits or approvals were granted for the accessory structures built that are pertaining to the nonconformities. So it's just kind of the surrounding uses around the property. As mentioned, there's single-family residential zoning around it, and currently to the north, those are all residential uses. To the east is a residential home, but as you can see, there's a large portion that is undeveloped of that total site. Also to the west is a residential use in the northern portion of the east of the property, and then kind of an undeveloped area that's mostly trees. And then the property to the south is still undeveloped, but once McHard Road is created and has frontage, it could be developed on then. So these are just some images of the site. This is looking at the property from Scott Lane facing south. If you could see it, maybe kind of hard. Towards the back is the accessory structures, and towards the front of the property, where there may be there's dirt kind of cut out, that is where the actual home will be placed towards the northern portion of the property. This is looking to the east, to the property to the east and the property to the west. The property to the east is the one that is, the residential house is farther to the left of your image, and the undeveloped part of the site is right next to the property. Then the other home is a little closer on the west side, and then the undeveloped portion is towards the back. And looking across Scott Lane, looking north, is more residential homes, as was mentioned. So kind of this is just a brief site plan. This is the site plan that was proposed through the residential permit for the proposed addition of the reconstruction of a single family home. We'll go a little bit deeper and focus in on it in the next slides, but I just wanted to bring your attention, the accessory structure at the back of the property, which you'll see in the aerial on the next slide, is not shown on the site plan, but I wanted to make it clear that that will be on all of the images moving forward and all the illustrations showing the nonconformities. So once again, I just wanted to show you the aerial. There is an accessory structure there on the site. And as you can see, there's a portion towards the north that is where the home will be built. And then towards the back is where, or the rear is where the accessory structures are, as well as a horse rink. Here's the first portion of the site plan. This is just the northern part. It's the proposed 1,320 square foot single family dwelling that will go at the northern portion of the site. And moving towards the rear of the site, the southern portion, we see the accessory structures. There's the larger structure to the rear, as well as 2 medium-sized structures, and then 3 sheds that are kind of smaller. And the arrows are pointing to all those, as well as the horse rink. So kind of moving into the existing nonconformities, I kind of briefly went over them on the first slide, but going over it, section 2.5.6.2b of the UDC states that if a non-residential use is on a residential zone property, that it is subject or shall comply with the neighborhood service regulations. This is to be still be confirmed by the property owner. This could be used for residential uses, and this would not be subject, but if it's used for non-residential uses on the site, the stables and the storage, they're used for commercial, then it would be subject to the side and rear setbacks. So just going through these, the first one is if the structure is within the 15-foot side setback for NS, which is for if it abuts a residential property. And if you look closely, you can see the 10-foot build line is pointed out, and the structure extends into that 10-foot build line, showing that it is within the 15-foot side setback for NS, which is non-conforming. As well as on the other side, the east side of the portion, you can see the structure does the same thing. And then if you look towards the rear of the structure, you can see the 8-foot utility easement. And the structure is within that area as well, showing that it extends into the 10-foot rear setback for the neighborhood service district. Then also continuing on that section of the UDC, the structures on the side of the property, 3 sheds, are also all extending into that 10-foot build line. So they're also non-conforming in the fact that they are encroaching into the 15-foot side setback for NS that abuts the residential property, which is to the east. And moving on to our next nonconformity, it's section 2.5.3.1b of the UDC. In this section, it's kind of long, so I won't state the whole thing, but the main sections that it pertains to is that the structure cannot be less than 3 feet from the property line, and that the structure also does not encroach into the easement. And as was previously mentioned on the previous slide, the structure encroaches into the 8-foot utility easement, as well as being less than 3 feet from the property line on the rear. Moving into section 2.5.3.1f of the UDC, this section has to do with the total floor area of your accessory structures. And the UDC states that you can either be 50% of your livable area or 5% of the lot area, whichever is greater. But a caveat to that as well that will be considered is if these would be considered as barn or ranching or agricultural purposes, and then it would be exempt, but that is still to be determined by the board. But essentially, if the 5% of the lot area is subject to this, if you measure out the lot, it's about 6,276 square feet that they'd be allowed. That's 5% of the total lot area. And the total amount of structure square footage that they have is about 14,450 square feet, which is greater than the 5%. And then lastly, just section 2.5.3.1h of the UDC states that no property, unless you're 10 acres or more, is allowed to have more than 3 accessory structures. And as you can see on the image, this site has 6 accessory structures, which exceeds the allowable amount. And so staff reviewed the approval criteria for a special exception as stated in section 2.7.3.7 of the UDC. They found that criteria 4 met the request that the construction of a new structure on the same property where a nonconformity already exists, whether it is a nonconformity in an existing structure or of the property itself, provided the new structure assumes the existing nonconforming status and no nonconforming use is expanded into the structure. And the new structure would assume the status, and the nonconforming use would not be expanded because the home that's going to go on there complies with the single-family zoning that is on the site. And the structures, to our knowledge, are not going to be expanded. Accessory structures that are not conforming are not going to be expanded in any way. So based on that criteria and staff's findings, staff recommends approval of the requested special exception. It should be noted that the property owner still may need to obtain a consent to encroach or other measures of relief from outside agencies such as their utility provider. The recommendation for approval does not grant approval to those issues. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. We'd like to move into applicant presentation. Anything you want to say? Okay. Thank you, sir. We like for any person wishing to speak for or against proposed proposal. We'd like to move into staff, board, and applicant discussion. Any questions?
I have a question of staff, if I may. What we're voting on, or the question before us tonight, though, does not pertain to the number of, or possibility of having too many structures on the land, or we're encroaching on a utility easement, or any of that. All we're voting on, if I understand it correctly from the description of the variance, is whether or not we're going to allow a single-family home. Is that correct, or am I misinterpreting that?
Correct. Because the way we are interpreting this is there are non-conformities to the site. In order for the single-family residence to be rebuilt, the board has to approve the special exception to allow building on a site that has non-conformities to it.
So we're not implicitly approving any of these other non-conformances. Thank you.
Any other questions? You put the motion on the. Yes, sir. Would you please stand up and go to the podium and state your name and address for us, please?
Okay, my name is Julio. So can you put in the wall the picture and see the all canopies? It's like number 1, number 2, and number 3. Okay. The number 1, that one living in, when I have my old house, I'm living that one in the front. And the second one is living in the same property, in the same house, in the old. And the third is same. When passing Harvey, we over all. Exactly, when I got to my family, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. So my house, we not can repay nothing. So we need we take it the option to take it the new house. So I don't have a lot of money to take it one new ones. So we take it the free one canopy. We buy the RV. I got a picture to, I living in that one, in the canopy one. I'm living there with my RV. We living with my family there. I got a little more, like 4 years living in that one canopy. The canopy 2 is the little one storage. I'm living there my tools to my job. And the number 3, my wife used it to the watcher. So that one canopy is living everything in the free one house. So we move it everything that one temporary only to finish the new house. And when it's ready the new house, I want to lower everything.
Okay.
Because it's not new.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Just so that I understood you correctly, when your primary residence was destroyed, the one that you're requesting a variance to rebuild, when it was destroyed, you and your family lived in the metal canopy number 1 on this diagram in an RV that was parked in that canopy, and used shed number 2 for your work tools and number 3 for your wife's washer. And once the home is rebuilt, you are not going to use those 3 structures anymore. Those are going to be taken down.
Sir,
Sir, Ms., would you state your name and and your address for us, please, and go to
You
the
could speak
podium.
into that microphone.
Yes, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Martin Longoria, and I live on 7040 Prentice Drive, Houston, Texas, 77061. That what you just stated is correct. Once his house is rebuilt, he doesn't need any of those additions. I don't know.
Okay.
That wasn't a question, though. Are you going to keep them or tear them down? That's really the question.
Yeah, yes, so he can tear them down.
He will tear them
He will tear them down, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, while the applicant's intent may be to remove those after his home is built, granting the special exception does not require those structures to be removed. Your action is saying that those are the non-conformities and they are allowed to continue to be non-conforming.
Just to clear up, you don't have to tear those buildings down. You don't have to tear the buildings down unless you want to tear them down.
Any other questions for the board? We'd like to move into consideration and possible action. Motion.
I make a motion to approve variance application 21-00020 as presented.
It's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. It's been motion and second. Any discussion?
With the understanding that the only thing we're voting on is simply to approve or not approve the variance to allow the construction of the single-family residence. And we're not voting on anything having to do with the existing non-conformities. I support the motion wholeheartedly.
We're voting on the approval of a building being built with non-conformities around it.
But we're not voting on anything having to do with the non-conforming structures around it, though. We don't have anything to do with that today.
Correct. Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. This concludes the December 2021 Zoning Board meeting at 7:09 p.m.